Welcome to Behind the Audition podcast with your host, Curt Hilton. Listen in on interviews with voiceovers, filmmakers, producers, animators, and much more. Curt, a voice actor himself, will give insider tips to the business, talk with guests about how they got into the business, and be sure to stay tuned to the end of the podcast when he challenges his guests with a pop-up audition. Now it's time for Behind the Audition podcast. Here's Curt Hilton.
Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Audition with Curt Hilton. That's me. I have a fantastic guest for you today. We have been on the Zoom calls and the phone calls and the chats, this and that, and the Instagrams and emails. And today I am excited to bring a very talented voiceover as well as a sound designer. This individual has worked, for the Groundlings alongside with Kristin Wiig, Melissa McCarthy, from Mike and Molly. And actually I saw them last night on Bridesmaids. And that movie still every time I will stop what I'm doing and watch it. Coming to the show, the one, the only, Frank Harrison Jr. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, sir. How about you?
I'm doing good. I watched that last night and I laugh every single time. We'll get into, working alongside them, but I couldn't imagine being in the same room with those two individuals.
Oh man. And those two, my working relationship with the two of them was different for each one of them, but watching them make magic in the room together and the rest of the Groundlings crew, oh my gosh, it's just, oh my gosh. I can't say that I'm still in touch with Kristin and Melissa, but I am still in touch with other members of the crew. Every now and then I'll ping Stephanie and Flo from Progressive.
Yeah,
I used to work with her husband in the booth. Her husband did lights while I did sound, so that was great. Jordan Black, Karen Mariyama, Gary Anthony Williams is one of my vocal coaches. He was, as far as I know, he was never official Groundlings, but he's down with the Groundlings. Excuse me, that's my phone.
No worries. It's life. That's all good. It's a busy Monday, and that's awesome for you. I'm excited that this time of year it either starts off slow, which usually January does, and then February picks up, and towards the end of February is when we're towards political season, so that's when things start picking up and auditions pick up. But no, yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So sound design is something that's very cool into. How did you get into that?
Well, what's funny is I started in music. And what I not quickly found, I probably didn't find out quickly enough, is that engineering for music doesn't pay nearly as much as engineering for film, TV, and theater, and it doesn't pay as often.
Oh, that's good.
If you're a musician, unless you're a musician of note, you're broke. Musicians don't have money to even pay engineers. The rate, consider this, it's the same equipment and some of the same skills. Don't get it twisted to think that the same skills that are used for recording music are the exact same skills for sound design and recording, doing post-production recording. They're similar but not the same. It's like someone that's a really good baker but is trying to make gumbo. It's not necessarily going to be the same skill set. Same kitchen, not the same skill set. So whereas at the time, and this is years ago, at the time, top pay for a decent, or let's say middle pay for a decent recording engineer in a music studio was about $10, $12, at best $15. Whereas the bottom of the scale for an engineer in a post-production studio was $35 an hour. And that was early 2000s. It's like, okay. And then musicians notoriously don't pay that bill. Whereas in film and TV, that bill is getting paid.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that was an easy transition for me when I moved to Los Angeles. I already had an interest in it. I played around with it before I moved to LA, living in the Bay Area. But yeah, once I hit the ground in LA doing post-production, doing live sound. My first job in LA was live sound on a gospel play, on a touring play.
Oh, cool.
So that was great. But thankfully I didn't have to live out of a suitcase for too many years on tour. and landed a job with Outlaw Sound as a freelancer, and then eventually um, took over operations of the studio. At the same time, um, a mutual acquaintance introduced me to the Groundlings Theater. So I took what I knew doing shows and sound for even for music, and integrated into what I did at the Groundlings, and then took that experience and integrated into what I did at the studio at Outlaw Sound. So it was yeah, it was a bit of a journey getting there. So but it was it was fun. I will say, to this day, 20 years later, Groundlings was probably the most fun job I ever had.
You know, you always hear those stories of working with people, you know, that you know, when they start out, those old, like, you know, like Saturday Night Live, and like
Mm-hmm.
the place in Canada, it kind of like, I don't know.
Second City.
Thank
Wait,
you.
well,
Yeah,
they're
that's
not,
right.
and they're not necessarily in Canada, but they get a lot of people from Canada
Canada,
in
yeah.
Chicago.
That's what I meant. Yeah, yeah. And so you get like those old school theaters, and like you hear the stories. And I mean, I couldn't imagine working with some of the people you got to work with. You know, you're talking about Flo, you know, not Flo, but you know, Stephanie, Courtney, you know, Progressive,
Flo
like,
and Jamie.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, I saw her on Heartbreak Kid, um,
Hmm.
with Ben Stiller, and she
Hmm.
was actually part of the Alabama crew that came to Mexico. And you know, she is so talented. Like you see her in
Oh
other
my
roles,
gosh.
and you're like, oh, and even a couple of the people, like the girl in the Wendy's commercial and the AT&T girl, and a couple of,
Yep.
they're on other commercials. Even the I'm like the kind of guy that watches like the commercials, and I study them, and I, you know, look at them. The girl from the Eggo commercial, now she's on a like a allergy commercial. You, like, you know, they jump. You're like, they jump around and everything, and it's so cool to see, you know, the origin of the where they used to come from. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's gosh, Stephanie's been doing those commercials going on 20 years now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I just thought about that. I think her son's got to be about 15 or something like that. But oh my gosh, I'm like, whoa. And it's funny, and watching her and Jim, because her and Jim, I guess, were writing partners together
Oh wow.
at Groundling. So it's like, when I saw Jim adding, her adding Jim, and well, I wouldn't say, I don't know how that worked, but
Hmm.
it's like, oh, cool. Her and Jim are doing commercials together now. And
Yeah.
they've been going strong with this for over a decade, close to two. We're like, oh, that's freaking awesome. When you see people in the same crew bring each other along like that. Again, Bridesmaids is a perfect example of that.
Hmm.
All of those actors, and then some, even some actors that weren't, that maybe had, I'm gonna say they had cameos because they're actually that good, but you don't
Hmm.
necessarily know their name. It was
Hmm.
great to see Arion and a few other people just kind of in the background. Even the writer, the one that wrote, why am I drawing a blank on her name now? The writer of Bridesmaids had a cameo in her own movie. I'm like, why weren't you a character in the movie? But
Right.
she wanted Kristin to play her part. So it was like, oh, anyway.
Yeah, no,
Anyway.
yeah, every single one of those. I was talking to my wife last night. It's like every single one of those actors, like, it was cast probably one of the top 10 movies. Like, every part matched everybody perfectly. It was great. So when you chose sound design, what made you want to get into sound design, and what was the transition that said, I'm going into voice acting now? What was it that you chose sound design, and what made the transition, besides, you know, money, to get into voice acting?
Yeah, besides money. Well, again, I almost hate to say that money was the transition from music to sound design.
Hmm.
Just being perfectly honest. Actually, it was more challenging. It wasn't a grind. It wasn't the same grind. Let me say, it was still a grind, but it wasn't the same grind. Um, I'm trying to think of a
Was a passion for
clean way to
something
say
new,
it.
like a passion
Yeah,
for something different, like you weren't feeling
it's
like,
like
you weren't
when you're a
feeling anymore.
kid.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I made myself laugh one day when I was thinking. I was like, when I was a kid, I used to make sounds.
Yeah.
I used to annoy my sisters all the time. Like, oh, and then one day I was like, huh, I'm actually getting paid to do this.
Well, let me ask you this. So now you're doing voiceover. Do you do, I'm going to admit this, and it's kind of embarrassing, when you're in the kitchen and you hear the commercial in the background, because I'm always studying commercials and how they,
Mhm.
the style of the commercial. And do you, do you redo the commercial in the kitchen while you're in there? Like, do you try to revoice it yourself in
if
your
if
own
it's a
tone?
commercial that I hear on a regular basis, I'll catch myself basically karaokeing along with it. What got me into
That's awesome.
voiceover when I was running Outlaw Sound, most of our business was voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of guys, a couple of actors that came through to our studio on a regular basis. Yeah, I'm gonna name drop Andy Milder, if anybody knows who he is. He's a great guy. I haven't seen him around in a long, long time. But like even then, he was like, Frank, you could probably get into this on the other side of the mic. I'm like, no, that's not my thing. I'm happy over here with the faders. I'm great. But then he, sparked my interest. It's like, okay, maybe I should try this. So I've had one foot in, one foot out for a voiceover for years. So, I do a commercial here, do a independent project there, and just kept it moving in sound design. But because sound design became the steady paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And, acting is, I don't think I'm alone when I say this. When you're getting into acting of any sort, whether in front of the camera or just behind a mic, it's still kind of intimidating. In voice, we always see things about imposter syndrome.
Right.
And I guess that's part of it. But when you've worked with people that are just freaking phenomenal, you kind of like, okay, am I as good as this person? Can I possibly compete or measure up to this person? And you're like, so it's like, okay, do I, let's try it. Oh, I won that game. Okay, great. You keep going. It's like, for me, it's like playing poker. I'm a terrible poker player.
No, well, yeah, I totally get that. I mean, it's kind of like when you get certain jobs, or apply for certain jobs or auditions, and you're like you get excited about, kind of like we were talking about before the show. There's things you're excited about, but are you auditioning for the right reasons? Are you auditioning because you don't want to get the imposter syndrome? You're talking imposter syndrome. Sometimes that might be the case because you're excited for an audition because nobody wants to be left behind in this game. Because once you start getting ahead, you ever get that feeling where you start getting ahead? You're like, you have like a great month or a great week. Nobody wants to be left behind and go back, because in this industry, and this being on both sides, you can have a heck of a month, and next month it could be like you'll hear drips of water because it's so quiet and it's scary. And that's why you have to keep always hustling every single month to stay on top. You know what I mean?
Not every single month, every single minute that you have, every single free minute that you have. And it's also finding that balance between the work and it really is home and work life balance that you have to find.
Right.
It's been about 4 years, but I still consider myself a newlywed. So I try to like, okay, all my free time can't be voiceover. It just can't. I'm married. I have a wife. I need to cater to her needs and allow her to cater to me.
So you 4 years, you said, right? 4 years?
4 years.
So I remember that mark, exactly what you're saying. You totally get excited and you don't want to miss any auditions, and then you're at the point now, and I respect this so much for you because you say that is because you do have to have the work-life balance because if you focus more on the job, you're going to lose a passion for it. You're going to start feeling it's more of a job than fun.
Yes.
And I tell you what, and I respect you. Like, before we had this call, you're like, I have to finish this up, and you had something you had to do. But I see in you have that good drive, and you have that passion for something. So much respect to you on that.
Thank you.
Because work-life balance is the biggest thing. I just told the VO buddy on Friday, I'm like, look, I'm taking a half day off. I'm going to do a mental break. I diversified my business, so it's not just 100% VO, because you will burn yourself out faster than anything. And there are people who are busy all the time, and I hear it all the time, and I'm excited for them, but there may be a day, and I've heard also that takes a lot of energy out of them, and they become burnt out, and they don't have a passion for this anymore.
And it I don't want to tell anyone's personal story, but I know that it tends to make, I've got friends that, I'm part of a cohort called Local Alter. And we basically, it's not just an accountability group. These are some of my best friends. And some of them I've never seen in person before. We just communicate online. One of them is a good friend of mine from high school. But we all talk about, it's primarily men, but we all talk about how sometimes voiceover gets in the way of life. Some of us have kids. Some of us, sometimes it can make a little bit of, well, I'm just gonna dramatize. I'm exaggerating a dramatization. Well, you have to pick up the kids from soccer practice. What's so great about this audition? Like, well, it's kind of how we keep the lights on, you know,
Right.
you know, but you got to pick up the kids from soccer practice.
Right.
Period. That's where that is. It's like, so there's just some things that are just, it's not getting in the way of VO. It's like, okay, life is happening at the same time. So yeah, and you know, that's one of the things I try to keep in the forefront of my mind. Is like, okay, yeah, I gotta make dinner.
Right. Well, you
I,
you sound like you have like a daily plan too going on. Like, you know, last time we talked, you're on the phone, you were talking about how you have a daily plan
yeah.
throughout the day, and that's important too. I was just talking to a guest on here, and I was talking about social media. I've kind of, I'm trying to keep the phone away from me because that's a rabbit hole of, it can be positivity or it
Mm-hmm.
can be negativity. So I'm
Yeah.
focusing more on just, you know, 1 hour of marketing at this time, and then another hour later focus on reaching out to auditions this time, you know, and kind of making a structured day like you would if you had to go into the office. Because, you know, when you go
Right.
into the office,
Exactly.
you clock in at 9, you know, we're all clocking out at 4:59:59. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you
Exactly.
gotta set this like a business too, because otherwise, you know, I think all of us know we love this, and if we could do jobs all day, 8 hours a day, we would. But at the same time,
Yes.
you got to balance that time, and remember, you know, your kids are there. That's why I respect you, because you're still putting your family first, and that's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. And I encourage everyone to do that. You mentioned the phone. So, not to impose, you know, faith or religion or anything, but
Yeah.
like, even when you're, you know, being mindful of your diet and your health, people fast.
Hmm.
Well, you can also fast. You don't just have to fast from food. You can fast from social media,
Yeah. And I've seen people
or
do that. They do that.
and
They've
be
been gone for a while.
specific.
You're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and be specific about, okay, I'm not going to pick up Instagram on my phone. Part of our business is being social. We
right.
know that. We have to make posts on Facebook and LinkedIn and everything else. But in terms of the just either doom scrolling or my wife and I, we schadenfreude scroll because
Hmm.
we like seeing people slip and fall. We don't know why. It's just
Well,
funny.
that's natural, I think.
But we actually, you know, we have to schedule, okay, so for these 3 weeks, we're just gonna fast from that, so that when we come back to it, we're not interested in it, and we don't lose 2 or 3 hours just scrolling.
Mhm.
You know, that's 2 or 3 hours time I can put back into working on my next demo,
Right.
reaching out to agents, you know, checking in on some of my accountability partners. So
Right.
it's like, yeah, yeah, I do recommend taking a time where you actually say, okay, this thing here has got to go away for 5 hours a day or whatever it is. You
Hmm.
know, it's got to be there, but, you know, delete the Facebook app for a while,
You know,
just to keep yourself from doing it.
yes, and I find myself, I'm 48, and I when I go to places, and what drives me the nuts the most is when I see people with people, and they're both on the phone, and they're both not paying attention to each other, and there's no, like, the communication is just not there. It's like, why even go eat, drink, or have whatever and sit there and look at your phone the whole time? That is just like the weirdest behavior I've ever seen in my life.
One time I was on the BART train, and these two, I'm just going to call them two beautiful people sitting next to each other, have never met before. They're both really attractive people. And I'm like, wow, I wonder if they looked up from their phone, would
Yeah.
they find each other? Oh
Right.
my gosh.
Yeah. I know. I
I saw
know.
one get on the train in one place. I saw one get on the train in another place. I'm like, and they sat down next to each other. I'm looking at them both like,
Do you think
what am I seeing here?
do you think the human race is just bored of everyday life, that they feel like they need to get into other people's life on social media to find, or like they're trying to find? I know there's people who try to find things to do, but
Mhm.
it's just, I'm just curious. You know, I'm not the one who I don't like to judge. I'm just
Mhm.
curious. You know,
Yeah.
what is it that makes um, us human beings? You know, once we get into that social media, we get caught in that rabbit hole. What is it? You know what I mean? It's so crazy to me.
Yeah, it's unexplainable. It doesn't. Oh, I take that back. It is explainable. I've worked for websites, so the factor is to make the website as sticky as possible, and that's the phrase that's used. Let's
Mhm.
make the website as sticky as possible to keep people from getting in it, and we're trapped in there like flies. We start to blur the line between our own lives and someone else's lives. It's like every minute is the reality show of someone else. It's like, I am. Yeah. Again, my phone doesn't have the Facebook app at
Yeah.
all
Mhm.
because I don't need those notifications. When I'm on Facebook, I'm online. My siblings and my nephews like, you're never on Facebook. I am. I don't participate with that. I'm doing business. I don't.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I
So,
am on Facebook. I see what's happening, but I don't. I do care, but I'll call you.
absolutely. So what are some goals this year for you, that some big time goals that you want to do, achieve, and in voiceover, as well as maybe on the other side?
So, you know, I recently did my taxes. 2023 was for a lot of people was a bad year in voiceover. We had 2 strikes. So, but what I also resolved in myself to do is to try to not make up for last year, but to try to make it a new year with how I approach auditioning, how I approach agents. I'm ramping up the way I reach out to agents. I'm even I've even got some, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, like part of my marketing. I went and got some tumblers,
Yeah.
with the with my logo and name on them to, just as thank you gifts to
Do
people,
you, do you go
not
by
to
and drop
cold
them
call.
off? Is that what you do? You go to a studio or a production house in town? Or being in Los Angeles, is that what you do?
Oh no, 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 no. And let me clarify. I'm not in Los Angeles anymore. I am in California, but I'm in Northern California.
Okay. I
So
mean,
just
do you reach out to them, like, do you do like the old school,
yeah.
like, cold calling, or go by a studio? I love going to the
No,
studios too and drop them some swag stuff off.
no, I'll send an email. I'll send an email first and let them know that there's something coming for them. And like I
Oh.
said, the swag is for right now is for people that I've worked with
Hmm.
or I've coached with, or I've even at least had a conversation with. So it's not just totally cold. It's not just, I don't know you.
Hmm.
I'm gonna give this cup to the dog. I don't want that.
Right.
Hey, I just want to and it's a personal thank you. Each one is going out with a short handwritten note and a list of my favorite things that I'm
Right.
including with it. I'm including some coffee and some tea and some honey. These are my favorite coffees. These are my favorite teas. This is my favorite honey. I just want to thank you for working with me in 2023.
I remember back in corporate America, we'd have people come in with, like, they'd bring in stuff like that, as well as pizza and coffee and all that, stuff like that. And you remember those people just by
Yeah.
little things, and that is a good idea. I did make some really cool vinyl stickers and some fun
Hmm.
things. I have some VO buddies who we met for tea, and they gave me some cool the koozies and the little.
Yeah.
I mean, just little stuff like that.
I mean,
It's
it seems chintzy or, I don't know the word for it, but it's like, no, it actually, and it's not even it's not about it working in my advertising. It's just like, okay, these are people
relationship.
that I'm truly, yes, relation. A phrase that I learned when I first moved to LA was relationship is currency. It took me, I was like, what do you mean relationship is currency? And as I went on, relationship is currency. But I strive to keep my personal relationships, my business personal relationships, actually personal. I want to know, how are your kids? Hey, what toy were they looking for last year? I think I might have a line on getting that toy,
Wow.
for them, that kind of thing. It's like, hey, my buddy is blah, blah, blah in Broadway. I know your kid's about to go to school for acting. You want me to, put him in touch with him just to, have him give him a pep talk or something, and
Mhm.
he's willing to do that. So that kind of thing. But it's like, it's a true relationship. I don't like Hollywood relationships. I don't know if experienced Hollywood relationships, or I won't even call them Hollywood relationships, LA relationships in terms of friendships. It's the, what can you do for me? I don't really like those relationships. If
Yeah.
if I never book another commercial with this agent again, but I know Suzanne just had just went through a bout with the flu,
Hmm.
I still want to know how she's doing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I,
Well, it seems like a lot of people moving out of LA, and
mhm.
I hear about it. When my experience when I went to LA, it was very different. We went to that bar in the movie Swingers, the one Vince Vaughn and whatever, and there's a whole area in that, like, including the
Not-
Sunset area. We went into a bar and we were with somebody that
mhm.
it was an actor and one was a screenwriter. The environment it was, what do you do? It wasn't like, hey,
Yeah,
how you doing? How you doing?
yeah.
It was, what do you
What do you
do?
do?
Yeah.
That's
And
how
so,
people. That's how people introduce themselves.
yeah,
Hi, Frank. What do you do? Not
yeah,
how are you doing?
yeah. Yeah. I was like, good.
Yeah.
It
Right.
was, it
Right.
was different. I totally get it. But all right, since we were talking auditions at the beginning of the show, now
Yeah.
it's time for the audition challenge.
Okay.
And this time is going so quick. And we're talking, it's almost allergy season. I mean, I think it already started here in North Carolina last week.
Yeah.
I
It's
I had
definitely that in Northern
had a
California.
I had
Yes.
a deeper voice for a couple of days, which was cool for me. I thought I should have did some auditions with deeper voices, but I sent something to you in the chat, and this is
Okay.
for a new allergy relief that got written up for you, and I guess make it like a fun little promo for the newest allergy relief bubble gum coming out today.
Okay. It's Nick. It's bubblegum, so I'm already thinking Nickelodeon, Disney.
That's awesome.
Introducing Aller Relief Bubble Blast, the allergy medicine that's a breath of fresh air. Say goodbye to sneezing and hello to dandelion bubblegum flavor. Aller Relief Bubble Blast, because allergy relief should taste as good as it feels. Breathe easy, live freely.
Bravo. So have you ever had dandelion tea?
Yes.
And what's it taste like?
Um,
Dirt. That's what it's.
yes, it does. I'm like, if you put enough honey in it.
Yes. Yeah. So I drink it because I love tea around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I need some more auditions in the morning and in the afternoon. But I thought about that dandelion allergy relief because that's the first thing you think of, something it might work. Kids
It-
might
you
they
know,
might chew it.
is this real?
No, I just made it up.
Okay. Okay. You actually might be onto something. You don't, you
If
know,
I
if,
if I
if
ever
you
see
know
a
the
commercial,
science of
yeah. If I ever see a commercial for my audition challenges, I'm like, look, I have proof. I even have the VO, so pay him or her pay them whoever did it.
if I make a dandelion tea, if I make a dandelion bubble gum and I get paid, I am definitely going to include you in the regular residual payments
Oh
for
my
that.
gosh,
Hey, that
might be
you
real, right?
might be onto something.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy that the things that pop up my head sometimes. So we were talking imposter syndrome earlier today. What are some things that advice for those? Because you've seen both sides of the industry. You worked with actors, you worked with voice actors, you worked with musicians. What are some things that, talking to them, what are some tools to keep them from staying out of the imposter syndrome closet?
Shoot, I'm probably the worst person to ask this question. I still deal with it myself. But what I'm learning, for myself is that the imposter syndrome is kind of good because the person I'm not competing against my comrades. I'm not competing against Andrew Lander or Damon Allens or Bo. I'm not competing against them because these are my friends. The person I'm competing with the most is myself. So it's the imposter in me that I'm competing with, that I'm competing against. I want to be better than that guy. However, if the imposter in you is pretty good today,
Yeah,
let him ride, let him roll. Just go with it.
I love it.
The bubblegum challenge is like that was corn on corn on corn on corn the way I did it. That was my imposter doing that. And I
But
was
you, but
actually,
you heard it and you felt it, and that was
yeah.
cool. You know what I mean? And I really didn't direct it that well, and I really never do all the time. But I want people, and they do it to kind of, how do you think this commercial would go? Because I've heard a couple big time VOs tell me, do one take like you think it should be, and you'll be surprised what the casting director says. Like, actually, I didn't see it that way, and they've actually turned it to your way. So
And you know what?
yeah,
That's how I've booked a few commercials. It's like it's not what they really asked for, but this is what I hear here. Like, okay, that works.
Right. I love it. And that's why this season, it's I get to know the guest and talk about their past, but more of a conversation this year. And that's what I had some goals. And I think we had a great conversation today. And that's what I want to do
Fine.
with fellow VOs and talk about what you've done in your past and, what your goals are. But at the same time, what we're really feeling, because I think at the end of the day, we've, the last 4 years, things have been, I think, mostly the same after the pandemic, and now we're in year 4 afterwards. But
Yep.
what are we doing to stay healthy, mindful, and keep going? Because we all need that inspiration. No matter if you've been this for 25 years, 2
Mhm.
years, 6 months. What are people doing, to help each other and motivate each other? And
Yeah.
your story has been great, and I can't believe it's gone already past 30 minutes already.
Oh, geez, have we really? Oh
Just
my
that
gosh.
just that quick. Um, we're gonna have to do this again because I had a blast.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
then
we definitely. Oh man, we got to talk more
how,
with the camera on and then with the camera off.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. How could we reach out to you on social media? I know we just talked not doing that, but just to have a conversation. Where can we find you on the World Wide Web?
Start with my website. It's www.bluestonevo, BLU, no E, STONEVO.com. You can find me on Twitter or X at Blue Gem MW, which is the other side of my business, is Blue Gem Media Works, because I still edit and do sound design. Audiobooks was actually pretty lucrative over the last two years as an editor, so I also do that as well. Yeah, find me there. That's the best place to start. On Facebook, I am at Mr. President with a Z, MR President with a Z. That's where I am. And on LinkedIn, I've been on LinkedIn so long that I am /Frank Harrison.
I love it. I love it. So it's one of the originals, that I love that.
Yes.
You got lucky. It's kind of like I did with with the Twitter account. And what's the other one I did? The Voice 123. I started in 2007. You start at the beginning. You get lucky with those. Nowadays, it's like your name 4568745 /_
And wait, now you got me questioning my Facebook. Is it Mr. MR or is it MISTER? I was like, wait a minute, I've had it so long. Just look for Mr. President with a Z. You'll find me. Frankie Harrison. That's how you'll find me.
Well, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on Behind the Audition podcast. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank
Frank
you.
Harrison Jr. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening in on Behind the Audition podcast, made possible by Hilton Productions. If you need a male or female voiceover, contact us at hiltonproductions.com. Hilton Productions, let our voices do the selling.